Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another exciting edition of Fake Chats with your host, Andrew Burnett. Today, I am with a business, law, and culture analyst, my buddy, James Hirsen. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Andrew. How are you?
Good. So, how did you get into the analyst of studying the culture and law and business?
Well, I come from Chicago, and in Chicago, I did studio work. I was a professional musician, and so I worked with strictly African American groups, and mostly associated with soul music. And I played with Natalie Cole and the Impressions and Jerry Butler and a bunch of groups, and ended up on the road for several years with the Temptations. And so I was inspired because I was in a studio in Chicago and I actually watched in person the legendary James Brown come in to renew his contract and get an advance. And it was very obvious that he was broke and he needed money. He was getting ripped off. So I was inspired at that point later in life to become a lawyer. But I ended up, even though I had started representing some music people, I ended up working with entertainers in Hollywood. And simultaneously, I was writing articles from a right of center point of view for Newsmax, which I've written for oh my goodness, 25 years, and I started writing books, and so consequently, when I wrote books, I ended up going and promoting the books, and I was a regular on Bill Maher's Politically Incorrect, and then I started doing all the cable shows and I wrote a book that was kind of a comedic called Tales from the Left Coast. And it was about Hollywood politics, which now, it's they've reached like interplanetary absurdity now. And so I've been doing this kind of punditry for more than 20 years, and watching and observing as things that I actually predicted in a lesser known book. I wrote a book called The Coming Collision. The subtitle was Global Law versus US Liberty. Little did I know that when I got older, I would be living in an era where that was slowly being imposed on the world, which it is right now. So,
So, did you did
it's an
you
amazing.
ever, did you ever think that while you were traveling in music that you would be a lawyer? Did you always have that mindset, or was it something that just came to you one day when you seen James Brown go through the contract?
Well, the James Brown thing kind of stuck in my head, but I was in Los Angeles. I was doing studio work. I had a family member get injured, and I thought I had to try to do something to get off the road. And that's when there was a friend of mine who was a lawyer that was managing a rock group named Styx. You may have heard of them. And I had a meeting with him and talked to him about it, and he encouraged me. And so I ended up preparing and went to law school, and then started working in the legal world and in Beverly Hills at a law firm, and then branched out on my own. And it was, it turns out that's another whole subject, but my profession is not what it used to be. The legal system is embarrassing, the way a lot of it is being implemented. And so it's just one of the many institutions that needs reform.
So are you still working with Hollywood and entertainers today, or is there a different type of law that you're doing now?
No, I still do selectively work in the entertainment field, yes. And it brings me into, sometimes involuntarily, other types of law. My specialty is in transactions, in negotiating, in reviewing contracts, and knowing the very unusual nature of the entertainment business. It's got to be either one of or the most vicious business in the world. And so there's very unusual tricks that are placed in actors' contracts, musicians' contracts that are unlike anything you see in any other industry. So that's been my specialty.
So let's talk about the new op-ed that you just wrote about J.D. Vance and the Hillbilly Elegy, and how there's a public demand for his backstory. Share with us a little bit about where you got that idea.
Well, one of the things that we deal with all the time is polls, and polls are mostly unscientific, inaccurate, but markets are accurate. And so I started looking into what had happened to J.D. Vance's book and his movie, and I bought the book. I skimmed through it. I looked at the movie, and it was very interesting. Like right after he was announced as the VP candidate, the book sales skyrocketed. I think it was 13,000% or something. And then the Netflix downloads went, it hit the top 10, was like $4.8 million. And people were taken with his story. And it's mainly because it's so honest and genuine, as JD is, because, he really is the epitome, not of just of the American dream, but of the forgotten working poor, white Southern poor in this country, coming from the Appalachian background, having grown up partially in Ohio, partially in Kentucky, but having the values and the understanding of the suffering of the forgotten poor in America. And it's such a compelling story because, of course, because of his grandmother that he calls Mama, that many people have had this. Clarence Thomas was another person that had a grandmother that made him the man he is today as a Supreme Court justice. J.D. Vance had this grandmother who understood values, who understood hard work, the work ethic, instilled ambition in JD, even though really most people who went through the experiences that he went through as a young person, having for his mother, a drug addicted mother, who at one point tried to kill him and her. She was going to do a suicide murder, and he managed to escape. Most people would go through an experience like that, it would break him. But because of his grandmother, because of his sister, because of these strong family and community relationships, he was able to rise above, went to a very prestigious law school, Yale, met he met his future wife, and now he's married, has kids. The funny part is, here's a guy, served in the Marines, he's now married, has kids. He was successful in my state, in California, in Silicon Valley, doing venture capital business, another very tough business. And so the left didn't know what to do with him. They were scared. And they should be scared of JD because he's brilliant, he's spontaneous and genuine. He's everything that they are not. And so I'm sure they got together and said, what are we going to do about this guy? We've got a Dan Quayle him. You're too young to remember Dan Quayle. We've got to Sarah Palin him. We've got to demonize him. So they started out by coming up with this kind of a meme attack. They pulled it out of fantasy land, but there's still a lot of lefties that believe it because we're still hearing lefties spout it, but they combined it with this meme where allegedly JD was reported to have a proclivity to have intimate relations with furniture. That's the way I'll describe it. And so they started attacking him with that, and that morphed into the single word that we heard repeated hundreds of times in the media by politicians. It's faded a little bit, but it was the word weird. And how ironic can you get? Here's a guy served in the Marines. He loves his wife. He has a beautiful relationship. He's got children that he loves, and he's a success, and he works hard. If that's weird, I want to be weird. And this is from people who say that giving little kids drugs that will change them for life into the opposite sex and castrating them without their parents' permission, well, that's just peachy keen. Drag queen story hour, that's fine. Having people in the White House who steal suitcases from women and have roommates that dress up as animals, that's cool. But JD Vance is weird. But anyway, I think all of these things so far are backfiring, and JD has proven it. He just did this spontaneous press conference on the tarmac in front of Kamala Harris's jet. And I think he showed what a brilliant, spontaneous, and genuine guy he is. He's a weapon. I think it was a great choice, and I think he's just going to keep blossoming because this is a little bit new for him, but you can see him getting better every outing.
So at first glimpse, when you first heard of JD Vance and his life story, what was the first thought that came into your mind?
Well, it really was the thing I mentioned. It was in my life, I grew up in Chicago, so I knew African American poverty well. I played in studios on the south side of Chicago, where today I probably couldn't walk around. It was not safe. But I saw suffering, I saw poverty, and there was an area of Chicago when I was there where there were Appalachian transplants that were there. They were what you call a hillbilly, and they had unique problems, and they are forgotten. They're not in a victim class that is classified as someone that should be helped by the Democrat Party. They were ignored by the country club Republicans. And until this populism that Donald Trump champions, that JD Vance personifies, came into view in 2015, they were forgotten. So it's part of the group, working people, decent people, people who want to raise their families, want really to be left alone. They don't really want to be forced and told what kind of stoves to have, what kind of cars to drive. They want to determine their own children's education. They don't want to have books that are softcore porn and hardcore porn forced on their children. So those are the forgotten people. And we see it, and I should include veterans, because we have a situation today where we have veterans not getting the proper funding and care, and it's going to people who have come into this country illegally, basically are lawbreakers. The funds are being diverted from the veterans and going to the lawbreakers. So veterans are also part of the forgotten population. It's a very large group. If they all get together, they'll be able to throw out the evil that is taking our country in the wrong direction.
Well, James, I have enjoyed this conversation with you. Tell folks how they can find out more about your articles, your writings, and I see you even have some music on your website.
I do have some music on my website. I am a musician, and so I do. There's a little tab you can hear some music. I also have it on my Facebook page. It's under my name, James Hirsen, Hirsen. I'm on Twitter X as the Jim Jams. The Jim Jams is my name on X. And I have my own website, James Hirsen, HIRSEN.com. And of course, you can find my articles on Newsmax.com, and now on your show.
Well, thank you so much, James. God bless you, and I enjoyed the conversation today.
Well, I enjoyed it with you, Andrew. You have a beautiful, blessed afternoon.
You too.